Just happy. I'm just glad we're not doing this in February. If it was wet.
Spring, it was pretty much February. Dang it, man! I hate wet feet.
Aaron, this is gonna get.
You want a piggyback ride?
You can't carry me.
Oh, I can too.
Could you really?
Oh yeah.
Okay, not too far. Back me up. All right, that was bad.
Oh my God, that's teamwork. That's teamwork. That's good, guys. Thank you for that.
I got introduced to Luke and his company because I'm doing a timber stand improvement project here. And with that timber stand improvement, I'm avoiding some of the high quality areas that have good quality timber on it right now. So the areas I'm doing TSI don't necessarily have good trees in them now. So what we're doing is eradicating invasive species, and then I'm freeing up our good crop trees. Luke is here to get an inventory on our walnuts. So I'll let Luke talk a little bit about his company and then what he does and what he's doing here at my farm.
Great, thank you, Aaron. I'm a forester, certified forester, and got a degree from Iowa State about 10 years ago, and have been in business. I own a company called Prudenterra where I help landowners to manage their forests. One of the most important parts of managing a forest is understanding the areas of your land and how they have different species growing in them, and what each area of your forest needs in order to ensure that every species will continue to be on the site in the next generation, and hopefully of higher quality too. In Iowa, we have such rich, fertile soils, and we have such good rainfall that we grow a lot of different species, and that's a problem because only certain species have. Not every species of tree has the same benefit to deer or wildlife, right? And so making sure you have all the species, including the ones that are the most critical, like white oak, bur oak, and black walnut, hickories, those three groups of species are really important.
Yeah, for me, immediately that means income. So, but then again, that immediate income is going to let new growth and new sunlight come down to trees that are a little bit inferior right now. So Luke's gonna bring us over to a giant walnut. While we were all spending time having fun at the Deer Classic, Luke was giggity about these giant walnuts in here. He's texting me on Saturday, basically hugging trees. So we're gonna go to the biggest walnut he's ever seen right back here.
So this is a really, really big black walnut tree. In Iowa, we just do not generally have walnuts get this large. And I'm gonna kind of walk through the things that are great about this tree and the things that are really problematic. And hopefully we can learn a little bit together. So one thing, notice how deeply furrowed this bark is. That's a sign that it's growing really well. You know, that at least this side of the tree is growing really well. Maybe that means it's dominant, so it gets the most sunlight still. But yeah, when you see this deep furrowed bark, and this is an old logger that marked the tree. Yeah, there's a bunch of that in here. This is our mark here, but then you kind of walk around, you start to see some flattening off parts of the tree, like right here, super flat bark. That's usually an indicator of a problem, like where the tree has like a wound or is diseased. So there's a huge white, kind of a smooth patch right here. That's what I call a defect. You know, I tried to put a diameter on this. I think I said it was 35. Yeah, I think conservative, it's like a 35-inch diameter tree. Probably the widest part of it, you might be able to call it a 40-inch or 42-inch, but in terms of usable lumber, I think maybe 35 is a fair average. So I don't like this defect. That usually means it's a lower quality log. And then on the other side, there's a really big defect that I think everybody and their 5-year-old would notice this defect right here. Yeah, I saw. You know, so whenever I see a tree that has a defect that poor within the first 8 feet, it's definitely going to reduce its value. The most valuable part of a tree is called the butt log, which is the first 8 feet. So if you have any defects within the first 8 feet, which this one has a major defect, it's definitely going to get reduced in its value. So
would you still say this is a veneer log or is it a lumber?
this is a lumber grade. Whole tree is lumber grade. That's right. Veneer. I'll show you a veneer tree. What I think would be a good candidate for veneer.
So what's the price difference between a veneer log and a lumber?
That's a
log
great question.
For a walnut?
That's a great question. The walnut industry is so fascinating. There are 6 individual Iowans who buy every single veneer log that's cut down in the state of Iowa. 6 people control the entire veneer log market. So those 6 people ultimately decide how valuable any individual log of a veneer quality tree is. So I'd say the difference between a lumber grade walnut and a veneer grade walnut is somewhere between 10 times in value.
Really?
Yeah. So you might get, for this tree, we might get $1.50 or $2 a board foot. Maybe the number of board feet in this tree is mostly going to be in that second section above this defect. So this tree might only be worth $1.50 or $2 a board foot if we're lucky. If we get a good price. If it was a veneer quality and this defect was gone and that other defect was gone, it was just perfectly clean 36-inch veneer quality tree, that could definitely be in the $15 a board foot, $10 to $15 a board foot range.
That's a huge difference.
It's just a tremendous difference. Yeah. So lumber, everybody knows what lumber is, right? You just cut a tree into boards, right? Like maybe 2-inch boards or 4-inch boards, or straight chunks of lumber. So veneer is, you have to have a perfectly straight or perfectly circular kind of round log that you can peel. And you actually peel it like you're peeling an apple, and then you have these tiny little thin sheets of peeled wood that you can then glue onto inferior quality woods. So you could take like a poplar base wood and glue this little thin strip. Yeah, glue this little tiny sliver. Yeah. And so they're actually peeled, and you can turn one log into 1,000. By peeling it and then gluing it onto lower quality wood. So, veneer is a really important market for all species. Could be veneer quality, all species, but generally in Iowa, white oak and black walnut veneer are the most valuable. Cool. In these bottomland floodplains, the only sustainable harvest, in my opinion, is small clear cuts, 5 to 10 acres in size. And by that I mean, in Iowa, the context means sell the black walnut timber first. Then if you have any other valuable species of good form, like silver maple or cottonwood, if you're near a mill that could use those species, then harvest those lower quality trees. And then come back with a hand crew, cut stem herbicide treat or basal bark herbicide treat every other tree, because every other tree in here is not a tree you want to grow. And even if there was like 1 or 2 little walnuts or oaks, if you just let one tree grow up all by itself, it's going to have a lot of poor form,
So Luke gave me an analysis. You told me about planting a cornfield, your last analysis. Remember that?
Yeah.
What was that again?
Yeah, so a lot of my landowners are farmers, and you might think like, in this bottomland. Now this only applies to bottomlands. This landscape position, because flooding and shade, there's very few species that tolerate both flooding and shade. So in bottomlands, small clear cuts are really the only way, in my opinion, to regenerate lots of diverse species successfully. At least the species that are most important to sportsmen and timber sales. So think about it like this: like, if in this 6-acre bottomland unit like we're in, if you've got 2 good walnuts that are like 13 or 14 inch diameter, that means that means that they're 30 or 40 years away from sale. Well, maybe we should keep those, right, Luke? Well, not really. Like, if you lost a 40-acre field from flooding and you had like 4 or 5 rows of good corn in the middle of it, would you try to keep those 4 or 5 rows and like grow a crop from them? Heck no. Heck no. Wait, there's a whole system, right? So there's the same thing with trees. Is And I know it's a really sensitive topic, and we spend a lot of time working with our clients to help them understand why such an apparently extreme measure is justified. But you can really see if you just pan through this forest, you got this huge big bur oak right here, this beautiful old tree, 250 years old, 220 years old. But if you pan around to the left, and you see these really poorly formed trees, right? So you got a really poorly formed silver maple, you got a really poorly formed black walnut, you got a black walnut with that terrible gouge in it. It's only got like a half log of usable timber in it. Why keep all these poorly formed trees around, right?
Right. Just because it's a good species doesn't mean you should keep it.
Exactly.
Poorly formed.
Exactly.
Okay.
So to me, this whole bottomland says, restart, liquidate the assets, get what you can. There's a lot of poorly formed trees. Poorly formed trees means more likely to die from storm damage, right, or disease or pests. Yeah. So restart, regenerate, get a whole thick mat of oaks and walnuts growing up in this bottomland. Let's get a quick diameter on this one. 40 inch bur oak. Fantastic.
So what's the tonnage that you think this thing produces in acorns?
Well, if you look up in the canopy, I'd say right now, not nearly what it could or should be producing.
If it was opened up from all these competing trees?
Yeah, like right now we got this huge American basswood that's overtopping it on that side. We've got silver maple on that side in high competition. We got the black walnut we're going to harvest in high competition.
Yeah.
So like looking up and evaluating the whole perimeter of the crown or the part of the tree with leaves on it is just a really critical thing to do.
Years ago, if we were to do a TSI practice, exactly what I'm doing on the rest of the farm, what I'm doing right now is I'm picking out this tree. This is my crop tree, but much smaller, right? This big. And I'm taking out all these inferior trees around it and I'm girdling them or I'm dropping them. So it's going to allow this tree, like he said, to be able to spread out its canopy and produce a lot more tonnage for the wildlife.
Yep.
So it just wasn't managed 30, 40, 50, 100 years ago.
This is also a sentinel tree or a wolf tree. It tells us something about the history of this site. And it's a spectacular example. Now when I said clear cuts, like I didn't mean cut down the big oaks, right? Let's keep those oaks because they can actually produce seed, acorns, that will be able to grow other bur oaks.
Yeah.
In this stand, it's really important to note that there's no oaks that have regenerated around this big old oak. So the reason for that is because of our grazing history, our lack of fire, and the way we did that selective logging. Oaks require full sunlight to regenerate, especially white oaks. They're very sensitive. They need 2 tree heights average radius circles in the forest. So if this tree is, what do you think, 70 feet tall, maybe 80? It needs a 160-foot radius circle of no other trees in order to have enough sunlight getting down into the forest floor to help those oaks regenerate.
That's so cool.
So with a small clear cut, like we're going to do, or like what I'm going to propose, we should have ample sunlight and allow this beautiful old big tree to make sure that it can produce offspring.
So with white oaks, is that why you get white oaks mainly growing on south-facing hillsides?
Heck
to
yeah.
enjoy the sunlight?
Heck yeah, and they're also drought tolerant.
Gotcha.
They're the most drought tolerant of the oaks.
Sure.
So they can just compete in really extreme low moisture environments. And all the other species are like, sorry, I'm kind of a wimp. I'm only going to grow where it's nice and moist. And
Right. I've always been real hesitant to go cut trees just because I like having these big, beautiful trees.
Yep.
But there's a chance that resource could get wiped out by, like I just said, we have some big walnuts over here. They're so tall they got hit by lightning.
Yep.
You got windstorms. You mentioned butt damage over here on the butt of the tree. So it's not bad. It's not, you don't feel bad about cutting that out of there and collecting a paycheck. It's not only good for the forest long term, but that tree has value right now.
Absolutely.
Why waste it, right?
Yeah.
And especially what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinvest the value from the timber sale right back into the farm, into the wildlife. And that could be a variety of different investments, but I'm not taking it out.
Yeah, I agree. And I shouldn't say like, so my philosophy is that every landowner has their own calculations that's important to acknowledge, right? Like I've got clients who've literally brought me to their land and they said, you know, my mom bought this in 1972. She loved coming here to look at the wildflowers. We would have picnics together growing up.
Yeah.
That's why I use my land. That's what I care about. And I don't want anyone to ever sell timber from it. And it's like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I understand what motivates you. But I also took the time and walked around and showed this landowner, hey, look up on that ridge there. You see all those big old white oaks and bur oaks? And he's like, yep. And I'm like, you see that big pile of down chunks of oak that fell on the ground? He's like, yep. I'm like, these trees, these bur oaks, only live for like 250 years or so.
Yeah.
So in 100 years, when all these are starting to die, there's going to be a lot of carbon.
Yeah.
That's going to be on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's not as dramatic as in the Pacific Northwest, where they have like a meter of duff. It's just insane. You can walk on like this sponge. It's insane, right? So it's not as extreme as that example, but carbon managing biomass. Forestry is all about trying to think about how can we sustainably utilize or repurpose the carbon that was taken from the atmosphere and put into that stem of a tree, and make sure we cycle it. It's got to be in our fertility of our soil, and all those factors are important. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one perfect way to manage land, and I'm sure I've made mistakes, and I'm going to make a mistake with this marking. I'm probably going to miss a tree, or should have left that one, right? But
not on this one.
So yeah, we have to have humility. We have to have humility, and we have to be aware that we shouldn't do everything the same. I think in Iowa we've treated every acre that could be cropped the same, and I think that has been a mistake.
Yeah, yeah. Standing next to a giant bur oak, and this oak is how many years old do you think this is?
A couple hundred.
So again, it's been producing good quality food for the wildlife for many years, and we're going to come through, and basically a good analogy is weed the garden. We're going to get rid of some of these inferior trees, some of the trees that aren't doing anything as far as creating value for the farm, whether that be financially or for the wildlife. And we're going to let these trees go through and reseed the rest of our forest so we can regenerate the resource that is currently 220 years old. And Luke pointed out a good point is we got another gigantic bur oak over here where the top fell off, and it's getting replaced not by other good trees but other junk. So we want to come through and we want to do a select forest cut in here and get rid of some of these invasive species. We're going to do that a couple ways. We're going to completely cut and treat. We're going to double girdle, and we're going to treat some of these smaller trees, just the bark, with a product called garland. So again, we're kind of looking to reinvest into this forest that has been given, but it's kind of now getting taken over by weed trees. So that's kind of the end goal that we got going on here. And I think, Luke, can you elaborate as to how people can get a hold of you guys in Prudenterra and utilize your resources?
Absolutely. A forester is so important to have if you own forest land in Iowa. And just give us a call. Prudenterra.com is our website. You can also call us at 515-382-1239.
And he thinks he's on Instagram.
I'm pretty sure. Got a guy for that.
All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Got a guy for that. It's bad it's 2022 and we don't know jack shit.
Something happened. I turned 35 and I stopped being able to keep up with the world.
Yeah, dude, that's